Good evening. My name is Babalo Kuma. Before the break, we had Lenina with the news and social media. Over 100,000 SASSA grant beneficiaries have told the Black Sash that illegal deductions have been made from the grants. They say that almost 105,000 people across South Africa had complained to them that unauthorized deductions for airtime and electricity between January and December 2016. Yet most of the people affected told the Black Sash that they do not have their cell phone numbers linked to their accounts. Over half of those affected had lost between 300 to 400 rand. We sat down with Elroy, Paulus, and Abigail Peters from the Black Sash, who is investigating these cases and unpack their research on the matter. Let's have a look at the insert.
Kule nyanga phele kule ngoFebruary ne ndiyile kaSASSA yo endopeya kwaShoprite ndafumana le mali kwaShoprite. Xa ndingene eholweni nyhani ndiye ndipeye upeya kwam xa ndijonga isliphu ndifike ndinale mali kutsalwa i-airtime ye-R100 yani kuphinde kutsalwe imali i-120 yombane kubekho le 12 rand fee andizazi ba azange ndaboleka mali mna.
Well, the Black Sash has worked on a monitoring process over 4 years now. And we started doing it when we first picked up a case which came from the Northern Cape. So when someone alerted us to this, that was happening. So when we did follow up with that, we found that people actually had deductions who never gave authorization for it. So a lot of people then after that came through our monitoring and had told us that it's not only a few people, there's quite a lot of people are dealing with these deductions. And this is how our monitoring came about. And this is what our monitoring focused on. So we focused on looking at people who have been experiencing deductions. And these are many different deductions, like you've mentioned, electricity, airtime, some for loans, some for funeral cover, that people, like you said as well, in some cases people have signed to have these deductions, and in most cases people had no idea. There was numbers with electricity and with airtime that they never even own, numbers that I've never seen before, and 5 different companies or cell phone networks being deducted. That's really out of the ordinary. Which person would have 5 different numbers? So people have to follow a process called the beneficiary payment dispute resolution mechanism that SASSA has put in place. And what they have to do is they have to go to their local SASSA office to go and put a dispute in to say that this is not them who has made this, authorized this dispute has put in place. And what the resolution mechanism that SASSA have to do is they have to go and their local SASSA office and this is not them who has put a dispute in to say that, like, out of the ordinary, this authorized this, has put in place. And what the resolution mechanism that SASSA have dispute but a lot of people who have also had access through their phone, there's a simple number that you can dial that you can have access to buying airtime and buying electricity. And for some people, it is very convenient to use. But after that, they've experienced actually more and more deductions from that. So the process that they have to follow is going to their SASSA office. But for many that have followed the process, it has not been really successful. Actually quite in length and detail on what goes on behind the scenes. But then we need to think about the practicality of beneficiaries and what they go through on a day-to-day basis to try to stop these deductions. So for this woman who needed to actually stop this green card, she needed to travel quite a distance. Now, if we think about normal banks for us, if I just think about where we are right now on the main road, there's maybe even 5 or 6 banks on that very street. And if I go to the city, there's the same thing. Same thing for going further down to Mowbray. But because Net1, it doesn't have a huge footprint, it doesn't have many places or offices or banks to walk into. So they are situated mostly in bigger cities. And for most people, they have to travel about 100 kilometers just to get to an office to try to stop that. And what implications does that have for a beneficiary? For someone like from Sirius having to travel that far, they will have to give up money that they already don't have to be able to do that. So the process of stopping that is not only made difficult for them to get to an office, which is probably already the thought behind that is already against the beneficiary. So it's already against them trying to be able to access their rights and be able to help themselves. They are not able to do that. So then they still have to be able to speak in a language that they can communicate in. So if someone is coming there who speaks Afrikaans and someone is speaking to them in English, how will they communicate what the issues that they have? Or if someone is going with Xhosa and someone is speaking in English, how will they communicate the difficulties that they have? So they are disadvantaged in so many ways in order to try to stop these deductions. For many people, their first point of call is the SASSA office, which would be correct to do. But for some of them who have the green card, they will have to be referred to go to a CPS or to go to a Net One office, which is the most difficult for them to do. There's not many places that they can go. For some people, they have local advice offices within their communities, and these are advice offices that give free legal advice and are able to assist with these kind of cases. And we work with these organizations. So they exist in communities even without the Black Sash being like in contact with them. They do that kind of work. But first of all, there has to be an office in the community for someone to be able to go to. If, for example, those offices did not exist as well, people would then only resort to going to the SASSA office. But those are people who actually have the motivation to take up their own case. Some people just take it upon themselves and they're very passive. People can be very passive and they just, I can't do anything about it. Maybe it just has to be like that, and they really just don't do anything about it. We are reporting on cases that people have actually stood up for themselves on and reported to us. How many other people are just sitting and saying, I'll just deal with whatever deduction I have. So for these people, what they have to do is they have to go then to a SASSA office. And if they don't get assistance there, where else can they go? Because if SASSA sends them to a Net One office or a CPS office and they go there, they also face the difficulty again from the beginning, having to start over. So it really looks very bleak for beneficiaries to find the assistance.
Welcome back on Our City. As you can see, our guest had a lot to say on the particular matter on SASSA. Let's have a look at the insert.
I think that given the fact that Cash by Master Services pays the money on behalf of SASSA and is also responsible for giving feedback to SASSA about the recourse, that the money gets reversed through the banking system that is paid back by CPS to SASSA. It's not additional money. So where we're at right now is that the Constitutional Court ruled in favor of the Black Sash and freedom under law, saying that this Cash by Master Services is on a short leash. You only have 12 more months to pay these grants, and then SASSA has to take it over, or there needs to be another way of paying it. We're certainly very unhappy that Cash by Master Services has to pay these grants because of the ongoing deductions, despite the court ruling. So we have to watch very carefully what happens next. The South African Social Security Agency, SASSA, is also going to be monitored by an independent panel of legal practitioners, in other words, lawyers, and independent experts. So the court said, we're watching you. And you would notice that Alan Gray and the World Bank and Net One is now issuing public statements about the deductions. So it's an area of great contest. The other court matter that we are anxiously awaiting is what I alluded to earlier on. Remember, I said on May the 6th, the Minister of Social Development said that no deductions can come off a SASSA beneficiary's grant, in particular not children's grants or temporary grants, unless there's a written permission by the SASSA beneficiary for a funeral insurance deduction, not more than 10% of the value of the grant. Because that's been an area in which there has been lots of abuse as well. People are fearful. our African roots require us and our identity to honor our ancestors with a decent burial. But the people who are out to make money feed on the fear of people, and people have taken out 4, 5, 6 different funeral insurance policies. So even there isn't the ability to have a dignified funeral to say goodbye to our loved ones. So that court decision is still going to happen. It's very unusual because the arguments in the court happened in middle of October last year, and usually it takes about 90 days for a magistrate or a judge to hand down a decision. We are 180 days later now, so we're all anxiously watching what's going to happen. It is very likely that regardless of which way the judge rules, it's going to be contested by the loser to go to the Constitutional Court. So this is an ongoing matter that must be watched very, very carefully. But people should not keep quiet about it. We must continue to speak truth to power. Okay, so in terms of Abigail and Zintle's question, one of the things that I would encourage any SASSA beneficiary to do is not keep quiet about it. I think our parents, our grandparents feel humiliated when this hardship happens to them. But I think they need to know via CTV and the work that you do that they're not alone. And so the numbers of the 105,000 reported cases, only 10,000 have been refunded. So 10,000 out of 105,000 is just under 10% of all the cases have had refunds. But the amount of money, given the fact that there are 10 million bank accounts for 17 million beneficiaries, the amount of money that was paid back through SASSA, through this dispute resolution mechanism, is only 1.2 million rand. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. Because the amount of money that's paid every year to SASSA beneficiaries in the form of grants is 152 billion rand. That's 152,000 million rand. So if you express the percentage of 1 million, it's not even 1,000th that has been paid back.
Okay, so just like you said, the Western Cape is actually working a bit better on deductions. The rest of the country is actually just following on with what's happening here. It's been more difficult, like for places like the Eastern Cape and for KwaZulu-Natal to follow up with cases of deductions. The training for the beneficiary dispute mechanism actually was done in the Western Cape. So these officials were first trained here and to be able to take on to these cases. But what does someone do who is in the Eastern Cape, in a rural area, especially far away from a city, having to go to SASSA or having to go to CPS or having to go to unpack? What do? Actually, SASSA does have their mobile services that do go into communities, especially rural communities. But these mobile services usually only come once a month. So people will have to wait for that cycle to be helped. But if they miss that, it is literally for them waiting and waiting until they're able to receive assistance then. If they don't have any means like being able to call the SASSA office, which they do have a helpline for, and which they do have different languages that they can contact, and we do have that number, then people can use that number. The number is 0800 60 10 11. That's the SASSA number. And then they can also try to contact them through their website if anyone has access to that. But they're also on Facebook and on Twitter. So they try to make it accessible to beneficiaries now. If some people have smartphones, some of their grandchildren have smartphones or family members, then it can be accessed through that. So to search SASSA on Facebook or on Twitter, then that's how they can contact them. But also then to dial 0800 60 10 11.